The story begins with a grim revelation. In just 10 years, the Eastern Federation Kingdom will collapse under the burden of the 5 great vices, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake. To prevent this tragedy, our protagonist has taken it upon himself to act as their overseer, though he never imagined it would turn into such a colossal undertaking. Originally, he was an ordinary man, trapped in modern life, grinding through 78-hour work weeks with barely a break. But fate takes a strange turn when he wakes up inhabiting the body of a noble in a fantasy world. At first, it seems like a dream come true until he realizes he can't read and he doesn't possess any sort of magic or power. Trying to at least understand the written language, he ends up holding a book upside down, leaving the butler speechless. When dinner comes, a maid serves him a grand feast, and he digs in enthusiastically, thoroughly enjoying the perks of his new identity. Even the bath is prepared for him, and he can't help thinking that being the young master of a count's household is pure bliss. Being pampered and carefree feels like heaven. Yet, there's one huge problem. He has no clue where he actually is. Normally, when someone is transported into another world, it's from a novel or game they're familiar with. So when one of the maids casually mentions that his older brothers, Leo and Tonio, will be returning tomorrow, he's baffled. The maid, in turn, is surprised that he seems to have forgotten his own family. As he mulls over their names, something clicks. They sound painfully familiar. Then it hits him like lightning. He's in the world of Psychedelia, a turn-based RPG he used to play during his rare moments of free time. But there's a catch. In every possible storyline of Psychedelia, once the 5 great vices, wrath, greed, sloth, pride, and obsession, emerge, the kingdom's nobility and cities fall into madness and destruction, and the Palacio family, where he now finds himself, is infamous in one of the game's early side quests. The eldest son, Leo Palacio, is dubbed the King of Lust, while the second son, Tonio, is known as the King of Vice. When he realizes this, he drops to his knees. He remembers this place vividly. It's the very first sub-quest of the game. Looking around, he sees that the mansion is exactly how it appeared in Psychedelia. The Palacio household is destined to be among the first noble families wiped out by the 5 great vices. And his current identity? The third son, Alan Palacio, a minor villain who meets a terrible end. His face remains blank as this truth sinks in. Even though he's just discovered that his death is certain, the only thing that crosses his mind is how much experience that quest used to give in the game. Lying in bed later that night, he's too scared to even close his eyes. He'd honestly prefer going back to his soul-crushing corporate job, because at least there, his life wasn't on a timer. The thought that his luxurious new life will end in exactly 10 years terrifies him more than 6 months of unpaid wages ever could. Still, he refuses to give up. Since he already knows the future events of this world, maybe he can use that knowledge to his advantage. If he can somehow change fate and prevent the rise of the 5 vices, he could save both the kingdom and his own peaceful life. It sounds doable. After all, those vices are still just children right now. The real problem is that he has no abilities whatsoever. How could someone powerless change destiny? 2 months later, he manages to pull off his first major move, though not by his own hand. His knight, Evan, successfully rescues a group of orphans from a human experimentation facility. Evan reports that he's left the care of the rescued children in the hands of a girl named Utia. The young master nods in approval, glad he chose Evan for the task, as the knight proves to be capable and trustworthy. However, because his face rarely shows emotion anymore, Evan can't tell whether that nod was a compliment or just indifference. Trying to clarify, the young master forces an awkward smile, which only makes Evan think he'll never get used to his lord's new demeanor. He recalls how Alan used to be easy to read, cheerful or gloomy. His emotions were always visible, but now he seems eerily expressionless. Even the protagonist suspects that possessing Alan's body may have left his facial expressions frozen. Evan, still uncertain, decides to accept the gesture as praise. The protagonist reflects that Evan is one of the rare honest souls in the corrupt world of Psychedelia, a loyal knight who never betrays those he serves. That's why he recruited him right away upon meeting him. Finally, Evan reminds him that the main reason he was sent to the testing facility was to save Utia, and the young master confirms that's correct. Evan remarks that he can understand why his master went out of his way to save the girl. Even with all his years of experience as a mercenary, he can tell Utia is no ordinary child. Her strength alone makes it hard for him to fathom why she ever allowed herself to be locked up in the first place. He then questions why the young master didn't bring her back to the manor, since keeping someone like her in an orphanage seems wasteful. Our protagonist agrees out loud, but has other thoughts in mind. He knows it might look like he's ignoring her potential, but leaving her there is actually part of his larger plan. Utia isn't human. In the original timeline of the game, she forms a pact with a being from another realm and eventually becomes the physical incarnation of wrath, one of the 5 great vices responsible for countless deaths. Thanks to his interference, that dark fate has been diverted. He wants her to grow up peacefully, far away from corruption. To him, that means he's successfully neutralized one of the 4 remaining disasters. Of course, he can't tell Evan any of this, so he decides to act cryptic and simply says, "The time isn't right yet." Evan, ever curious, wonders what his master means, but doesn't pry. Every supporting character has their own story, after all. He promises to respect his master's wishes. The young noble instructs Evan to keep the matter quiet and to ensure the orphanage receives enough funding for a comfortable life. Then he hands him a letter, asking him to deliver it personally to Utia. When Evan asks what the letter is about, his master brushes it off, claiming it's just a note to check on her well-being. He says he wants to reassure the girl after everything she's been through. Evan nods, vows to deliver it promptly, and rides off on horseback. Once alone, the young master wonders whether his letter will actually bring her comfort. In truth, it contains something entirely different, a few lines he remembers from the game. Back then, when Utia had already become the embodiment of wrath and was laying waste to the kingdom, the archbishop mentioned a strange phrase about a spell capable of reaching a non-human like her. The line went something like, "Cast agony from the shadows with the light of the fallen's grace." He never quite understood its meaning, but in the game, those words momentarily resonated with her before she killed the archbishop anyway. It wasn't that the spell failed, it had simply come too late, and her rage consumed her before peace could take root. Now, our protagonist believes that by sending those same words early, he might truly change her destiny this time. With wrath handled, at least for now, he's ready to move on to the next of the great vices. Still, he can't help but think how absurd it sounds to try befriending a potential monster with a single poetic quote. Yet, considering that these sins all seem to worship some mysterious higher entity, maybe there's something to it. To him, they all seem like fanatics. Meanwhile, we shift to Utia Sao, who's reading the letter herself, and she's not happy. Evan, watching her, can feel the immense surge of mana radiating from her small frame. It's beyond belief. He admits that she might be the strangest person he's ever met. Her face is emotionless, her voice calm, yet her power screams otherwise. She asks Evan to confirm whether the young master truly wrote the letter. When he nods, she explodes with fury, her mana flaring like a storm. The sheer force is enough to terrify even a seasoned warrior like Evan. Manifesting mana in tangible form, like she's doing, is something only master-level individuals can achieve. Her anger is unrestrained, like that of a jealous lover denied attention. Evan recalls his master's words that it simply wasn't time yet, and blurts them out in desperation. Miraculously, that line works. Utia stills, interpreting the phrase in the letter as a hidden message meant only for her, a secret promise she believes only her master could have made. Evan stands there speechless, completely lost as to what's happening. Utia, still wrapped in her eerie devotion, declares that she understands him perfectly. Her demeanor is chillingly similar to a certain vampire-like guardian from another story. She is, after all, the daughter of monsters, the Scarlet Queen Utia, destined to embody wrath. Back at the manor, our main character feels confident that he's bought himself more time to enjoy his comfortable life. As he drifts off to sleep, he imagines the bright moon smiling down at him in silent encouragement. Before lying down, he places a primrose flower on his bed, thinking it's just a cute decoration. All he really wants is to live peacefully and luxuriously. Is that really too much to ask? Unbeknownst to him, in the Astria Kingdom, primrose flowers are used in funeral rites, placed on the wounds or graves of the deceased. Symbolically, it's a terrible omen. The next morning, he's in the library, buried under falling books that seem to be punishing him for his illiteracy. He's currently researching the third vice, or as he likes to call them, the landmines. The process is frustrating beyond belief. Evan soon returns, reporting that they've successfully rescued another child, thanks to the young master's directions. When asked, our protagonist makes sure the child was treated gently after being saved from an underground slave market. Evan assures him that she was, but before their conversation can continue, the library doors slam open with a deafening crash, sending papers flying everywhere. The intruder? Tonio, the second son of the Palacio family. He immediately starts mocking his younger brother, demanding to know how an illiterate fool like him dares to hold a book. Our MC, expressionless as always, just stares back. Tonio's taunting escalates, but the young master decides it's not worth the effort. He plays it cool, saying Tonio can use the library if he wants. He'll be taking his leave. Tonio, thinking he's asserted dominance, grinds his heel onto his brother's head with a smirk. Before things can go further, a knife suddenly whistles through the air, lodging itself into the wall beside them. A new voice cuts through the tension, scolding them for being too loud. The newcomer is Leo, the eldest son of the family. As Leo and Tonio start bickering, our protagonist takes the chance to quietly crawl away, completely unbothered. He remembers that in the game, the Palacio family was wiped out early on, but seeing them in person, he realizes how powerful and dangerous they truly are. The two brothers are constantly at each other's throats, fighting over who will become head of the household. Leo controls the city's underground pleasure network, earning the title of King of Desire, while Tonio runs the region's largest drug ring, known as the King of Vice. Watching them fight, the young master decides there's absolutely no point getting tangled in their mess if he wants to preserve his comfortable lifestyle. And so, with his usual deadpan look, he literally crawls away from the chaos while Evan calmly follows, as if this absurd escape were the most normal thing in the world. As Evan adjusts his young master's hair, our protagonist silently vows to live happily, even if it means staying a powerless, incompetent, illegitimate son. A bit later, Evan comments that the second child they rescued didn't seem like an ordinary kid either. Watching his master lazily recline in his chair, Evan can't help but question reality itself. How could a man like this, who complains constantly and seems incapable of serious work, possibly have knowledge about illegal slave markets and secret human experiments scattered across the kingdom? Evan figures it must be difficult for his young master to maintain composure around his vicious brothers, while the man himself simply mutters about how exhausted he is. Then Evan asks why he decided to send that second rescued child to the orphanage. Of course, the young master has his reasons. He knows this boy isn't just another victim, he's an anomaly. The child hails from the Escalian Kingdom, the central state within the United Realm. In the world of psychedelia, this boy is known as Dias Macallion, the second major boss. In the game, after enduring slavery and brutal abuse, he eventually becomes the living embodiment of the sin of sloth, wreaking unspeakable havoc across the land. Many players were shocked by the cruelty of his story. Despite being associated with sloth, Dias was anything but lazy. He was known for relentless determination and an unshakable sense of justice, repaying both kindness and vengeance many times over. That's exactly why our protagonist told Evan to treat Dias with utmost care and gentleness. Even now, he still shudders remembering the nightmarish difficulty of Dias's battle scenes in the game. Trying to maintain his mysterious, wise, noble persona, he tells Evan the same cryptic line he always does. It's not the right time yet. Evan nods, unfazed, having grown used to his master's strange riddles. He then asks if the letter sent to Eutia this time was related to the second child. The young master confirms, but the reality is more ridiculous. Inside the letter, he's simply venting to Eutia about how his older brothers keep bullying him. It's both pitiful and hilarious. Still, he claims that he asked her to look after the second child who isn't feeling well. Technically, that's true. Dias really does need time to heal. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Dias sits alone, trying to hide his injuries and scars. Utia approaches him, studying him with cold curiosity. She asks if he's broken. Then, in a chilling tone, she mentions the Black Goat organization, and Deus flinches at the name. Slipping into her obsessive yandere-like demeanor, Utia tells him that even if he's damaged, he's still been chosen. She congratulates him for being acknowledged by the Blue Moon, which she defines as their master, the title she's bestowed upon our protagonist. It's clear she's forming an organization centered around him, and she promises Deus that if he remains loyal, he'll have his chance at revenge. Hearing this ignites something deep within him, and his latent magic, or perhaps the authority of sloth, begins to awaken. Satisfied, Utia happily decides to write her first reply letter to their master, grinning far too brightly for someone covered in mana scars. Back at the manor, the young master is buried in books, still researching clues about the third child. That's when Evan bursts into the room with alarming news. The second son of the Palacio family is dead. Even though our protagonist knew this event was destined to happen, the suddenness of it still rattles him. The funeral is held immediately, and to everyone's disgust, their father arrives with 2 escorts on his arms. Watching the scene, the young master can only think, even for this messed-up family, that's too far. He muses that psychedelia truly is the definition of a dark fantasy. As for Tonio's accidental death, something feels off. In the game, Leo had sobbed hysterically after killing his brother and claiming the title of heir. But here, Leo stands over the coffin smirking, not even pretending to grieve. At least try to act sad, our MC thinks to himself. Still, this isn't his problem. His focus remains on preventing the downfall tied to the 5 great sins. A year passes. Leo inherits Tonio's criminal network and transforms the chaos into a more stable, though still corrupt, domain. The Palacio estate grows quieter. During that time, Utia and the young master continue exchanging letters, becoming something like pen pals. He figures maintaining that connection will prove useful later. Utia writes frequent updates about the orphanage and the other children's growth. He's quietly proud, especially after noticing the sponsorship list keeps getting longer each month. Evan, munching happily on snacks, remarks that it's strange but definitely a good sign. Then he delivers the update our protagonist has been waiting for. They've located crucial information from the Intelligence Guild, an ancient text about the third child, the next landmine he must deal with. The young master nearly beams with joy. Finally, he can move forward. Everything seems to be going smoothly. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the kingdom, at one of Leo's drug depots, his henchmen brag about how generous their boss is, boasting that his operations now number in the hundreds. Their laughter dies quickly when chaos erupts. One by one, the men turn on themselves, screaming as if something invisible is forcing their bodies to move against their will. The perpetrators are none other than Utia and Deus. Deus manipulates deadly threads of magic, effortlessly erasing the entire group. He then turns to Utia, asking if slaughtering these people is truly necessary. She replies coldly, asking if he pities them. He answers that he doesn't. After all, these scum used human lives to produce drugs. Utia explains that this is purification, necessary to prepare for their master's rise. With a serene, almost divine smile, she says they can't let the place remain filthy when he returns. Deus nods in understanding, or at least he thinks he understands. Together they etch a glowing sigil into the ground. A surge of mana explodes outward, leaving behind a crescent-shaped mark. As they ascend into the night sky, Utia declares that all of this is for their master, the Blue Moon, and that they are his sword and shield. 2 years pass since the letter exchange began. Evan has been relentlessly pursuing leads on the remaining sins, and now he collapses on the grass, utterly drained. A touch of his master's mana restores his energy. Evan announces that they've finally located the 5th child and safely placed them in the orphanage. For the first time in years, our protagonist feels genuine relief. Though his expression doesn't show it, he's deeply moved. He's done it. He's saved all 5 children before their descent into sin. To celebrate, he rewards Evan with cake and tea, praising his dedication, finding the sin of greed. The 3rd child had been the hardest, but they managed it thanks to his insider knowledge from the game. Everything is finally in order. Evan asks why he doesn't seem happier. The young master insists he's thrilled, but his completely blank face betrays him. We even get a close-up of his smile, which is utterly non-existent. non-existent. Evan just sighs. He's used to it by now. Reflecting on their progress, the young master admits he never imagined things would go this smoothly. In the game, the 5 bosses became the great vices because of unbearable suffering. Saving them before that transformation seemed nearly impossible, but somehow he's managed it. When he asks about the orphanage's current state, Evan hands him a letter reporting that everything is running smoothly and the children seem happier every day. The young master remarks that if that's true, they might not even need a new caretaker. He's surprised Utia has handled things so well, though it makes sense, considering her deep attachment to the orphanage in the game's story. Reading Utia's letter, he finds that she's written warmly about each child's progress, especially Dias, reassuring him that everyone is doing fine. For the first time, a faint smile appears on his lips. He's genuinely glad they're growing up well. Evan asks when he plans to finally meet them in person. As always, the young master replies vaguely that the right time will come. In truth, he has no intention of meeting them anytime soon. He's terrified of the power they'll eventually wield. For now, distance feels safest. Still, he's aware that if he wants to survive in this grim world, he needs to get stronger. The answer lies in magic, and luckily, this body has the potential for it. While training, Evan mentions a new group rising across the continent called the Blue Moon. The young master feigns ignorance, but Evan explains they've been targeting corrupt nobles and criminal rings. Outwardly, he praises them, thinking it's a good thing, but deep down, he's uneasy. He doesn't remember this group from the game. Evan jokingly warns him to be careful, since Blue Moon's next likely targets are the nobility themselves. The young master freezes, then nervously orders Evan to start sleeping in the room next to his, just in case. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Utia convenes a Blue Moon meeting, the sin of Satyam pride. A girl named Sol Rang Di reports that she eliminated a group of slavers by decapitating them all. She boasts about playing a guessing game with them, promising to spare anyone who could correctly name her eye color. None survived. Then, Rena, the sin of greed, gracefully reports that all bodies were dissolved without leaving a trace. The organization is growing, and its devotion to the Blue Moon is only getting stronger. The sin of misophobia. Radin reports that he also wrapped things up in the south, taking care of the illegal human testing grounds and turning those Avalon bastards who were causing trouble into minced meat. These kids are seriously scary, I tell you. Anyway, the scariest of them all, Utia praises them for a job well done. Talking about how everything will go according to his will, she emphasizes that they all exist for the sake of the Great Moon. This secret organization worships the Great Moon, the Blue Moon, who just so happens to be our main character. Suddenly, Deus reports a problem which makes Utia question what could possibly be wrong when everything seems perfect under his command. These fools are treating our MC like some kind of deity. Deus explains that the head of Avalon is the eldest son of the Palatio Count family, where their lord resides. He claims to have found a dangerous written order while cleaning up the south. It turns out that the eldest son, Leo, is targeting our MC. Naturally, Utia can't let this slide. She unleashes an intense, murderous aura that sends the other kids cowering in fear. The letter reveals that Leo's plan is to slowly poison our boy after eliminating their father, which sends Utia into a furious rage. Fast forward 2 years, RMC's father, Count Palid, has passed away, and just like before, his funeral is held almost immediately. RMC explains that while the official cause of death is heart failure, it's clear he died from an overdose. Meanwhile, at the funeral, Leo gets news that the Blue Moon has struck one of his facilities. Seriously, couldn't they have waited until after the funeral? Leo keeps asking if everyone was wiped out again. Our main character, who's just casually eavesdropping, realizes that his brother is becoming increasingly cautious about the Blue Moon. As the Count's funeral wraps up without a single tear shed, our MC decides he doesn't want to get tangled up in all this drama and quietly slips away just as his brother shoots him a planning glare. When Evan asks what our MC plans to do next, since it looks like that jerk of a brother is on track to become the new Count, our MC is already one step ahead. He's been packing his bags and tells Evan to do the same. the plan to run away from this mess. Evan questions whether he really intends to flee, and our MC clarifies that it's not a complete getaway. They're just heading downtown to lay low for a bit. When Evan asks if he means the town of Rodmill, our guy confirms it. He's been eyeing Rodmill for a while now, and it's a small town in the south of Paleo, making it the perfect hideout. Plus, he's timed it well since Leo has been giving him some seriously unsettling looks. Once they arrive in Rodmill, our MC actually starts enjoying life, whipping up some delicious-looking toast while Evan just goes along with everything like it's the most normal thing ever. But 3 days later, their peaceful existence is shattered when our MC is forced to return home for his brother's funeral. He can't believe he's back so soon. According to the game, Leo wasn't supposed to die yet. The cause of the death is a stab through the heart, which leaves our MC wondering who could have done such a thing. He tries to ask one of the servants about the details, but they scream in horror as if they're about to meet their end. It's not just that. All the servants are acting strangely, overly apologetic, and treating him like he's some kind of mafia boss. He can't help but wonder what's going on with these people. As he's making his way out, Evan catches up to him, and he asks him if he found out why the servants are acting so weird. Evan claims he did, and playfully wonders if our MC was the one who made the Avalon drug organization disappear overnight. Turns out Leo was the head of that organization, and now that he's gone, it seems like the whole thing vanished without a trace. We then flash back to the day our main character set off for Rodmill. Inside the carriage, Evan was curious, asking why he's heading to a small town like Rodmill instead of a bustling city. Our MC explains that a city is simply not an option for him. Rodmill is his ultimate destination, the end game in all his plans. He shares that his mission is straightforward: save the 5 great sins from their misfortunes to prevent the world from crumbling. Plus, since Rodmill isn't part of the original story and has a villa, it's the ideal spot for him. A villa is a separate estate, making it the perfect hideaway for a laid-back noble like him, where he can relax and do absolutely nothing. Honestly, I share that dream. If you like this video, it would really help me out with my bills and give me some much-needed downtime. Anyway, our MC gets serious when answering Evan's question, insisting that everything he does has a purpose. But after hearing the same old responses for a while, Evan calls him out, pointing out that he always uses those same lines when he wants to dodge a question. He tells our MC that he can't fool him anymore. Our MC is taken aback by how Evan has seen through his little lies. As their banter continues, Leo, who's been watching our MC drive away, contemplates whether he should kill him or not. According to Leo, it doesn't really matter if our MC lives or dies. He had already planned to poison him, but now that our MC has decided to leave for the border, Leo feels he has no reason to go through with it. Yet for some inexplicable reason, he still feels the urge to eliminate him. He instructs one of his henchmen, Alman, to follow the carriage. Alman, however, asks if that means he's supposed to kill the MC. This question leaves Leo baffled. Alman has never questioned him before, no matter what orders he received. He usually just follows them without a word. So for him to speak up like this feels a bit odd. Leo reminds Alman that his job is to obey him, but before he can finish, Alman lunges at him, stabbing him right through the heart. Leo, in shock, shouts out why Alman would betray him like this, but Alman simply replies that he enjoys playing war. We soon discover that Alman is actually part of the Blue Moon organization, and his real name is Hidden. He explains that they've been taught a creed by Blue Moon. Since the Blue Moon is essentially RMC's sword, it makes sense for them to act according to his wishes. However, if anyone dares to threaten the Great Blue Moon, RMC, they're allowed to take matters into their own hands, meaning they can eliminate the threat. Hidden reveals he's been waiting for Leo to give the order to kill their lord, and he can't believe it took 2 years for that to happen. Leo tries to argue that his subordinates won't let Hidden live, but Hidden counters that with Leo's death, the entire organization will be wiped off the continent forever. Looking at Leo's lifeless body, Hidden can't help but comment on how unfortunate this all is. If Leo hadn't tried to kill their great master, he might have lived a few more months or even years. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, in the present, our MC is enjoying his dream life in the small town of Rodmill. He wakes up whenever he wants and shares delicious meals with Evan, living the life of a true noble. But his fate would have it, his peaceful existence is shattered when he receives a letter. The letter requested that he step up as the next head of the family. Just like that, his carefree life came to an end a mere 4 days after it began, forcing him to return to the palatial state. However, things felt off. The maids and other staff were acting strangely around him. He couldn't help but wonder what was behind their odd behavior. Then Evan teasingly asked him when he had become the shadow leader, leaving him completely baffled. It dawned on him that all this fuss was due to the bizarre circumstances surrounding his brother's death, which had led to his current predicament. In his usual dramatic fashion, he started sobbing, pleading with Evan to help him understand why he was seen as the villain in this story. Evan pointed out that since he stood to gain the most from the situation, it was only natural for people to suspect he had a hand in his brother's murder. Right after he left the estate, Leo was killed, and our main character had the perfect alibi to step into the role of the next count. Realizing how his plan to avoid this mess had backfired, he felt a wave of frustration. But Evan tried to lift his spirits, explaining that with the drug organization, Avalon out of the picture, and his brother gone, he wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore. Evan jokingly added that in short, our main character was now the new shadow leader of the county, who had supposedly orchestrated the assassination of a swordmaster. Despite Leo's scummy reputation, he was still regarded as a swordmaster. Our main character began to ponder where to even begin, as he couldn't think of any organization capable of taking out a key figure in the underworld so swiftly. He asked Evan about the group he had heard hunted other organizations, to which Evan wondered if he meant the Blue Moon. Our main character speculated whether the Blue Moon could be behind his brother's death and the downfall of Avalon. However, Evan quickly clears things up, saying that according to the Information Guild, the Blue Moon isn't to blame. Instead of leaving behind bodies, the Blue Moon is known for marking the moon itself. That's just how it operates. But it's rumored that all the members of Avalon met their end with a sword through the heart. Evan can't help but tease our MC, joking that the road to hell has been opened. But putting jokes aside, our MC reflects on his game knowledge, realizing there shouldn't be any organization called the Blue Moon, which means they can't be responsible for this mess. But if it's not them, then who could it be? As he tries to piece everything together, the scene shifts to the orphanage where Utia is holding a meeting with the other great sins. She asks if everything went smoothly, and Reina, the sin of greed, confirms that she left no traces behind. Surang, the sin of pride, adds that there was no one left alive on her end, just corpses. Diaz chimes in, boasting that he took out all 486 soldiers of Avalon. His magic is quite something, like a beautiful butterfly tangled in spiderweb. Then there's Rodon, the sin of misophobia, who also confirms that he cut down all the bad guys in half. Utia praises them for their work, but she's a pretty intimidating child. There are whispers that she's actually over 1,000 years old in the novel, but who really knows? That's how Avalon, the most notorious drug organization in the world that brought doom to the Asteria Kingdom, was wiped out in just 5 days. But suddenly, Rodon mentions that he doesn't think the cleanup was flawless. When Utia asks what he means, Rodon explains that he stumbled upon some intriguing documents linked to the nobles associated with Avalon, particularly the Altia Doctum, which has some deep ties. Hearing this, Utia's magic starts to flare up, and she tells the others they already know what she's about to say. It's time to wipe them out. Redden promises to handle it quietly. Moving on, Udikai then asks if the Information Guild is clean and whether they have any ties to Avalon. Rena confirms this, explaining that the guild matter is being dealt with separately from the other issue concerning the Blue Moon. Deiji, on the other hand, claims that all the guilds behave similarly, referring to it as the Hell Sword crafted by the Swordmaster. Hearing this, Reina inquires if she should keep tabs on our MC's movements, to which Udikai agrees, emphasizing that this entire situation must not reach that person's ears. She insists she has mentioned this multiple times, and they should all be aware of it. When she refers to that person, she essentially means our MC. Dias points out that since that person's family targeted them first, the order to eliminate eliminate them wasn't sanctioned by them. Upon hearing this, Yudia starts to panic. In her opinion, all their actions must be driven by a direct order from RMC. She claims they are essentially swords, and a sword should never think for itself. She declares to the other sins that from this moment on, all members of the Blue Moon must only act on orders, and they should take this decree seriously. This leaves the other sins feeling a bit uneasy, as Yudia adds that they must never disappoint that person no matter what. Inwardly, Deus thinks he can't quite grasp any of this. For someone as powerful as Yudia to feel anxiety and restlessness simply because she's discovered by that person seems excessive. But nevertheless, he tells Yudia that he understands. They conclude their meetings by chanting that everything is for the Great Moon, which is essentially afraid how the Shadow Garden from Eminence in Shadow wraps up their meetings. Meanwhile, back to our MC, he finds himself buried in paperwork as the new Count of Palacio. He explains that after his brother's funeral, he faced a full month of endless duties, and he feels overwhelmed by them. He starts shedding some tears, lamenting that he just wants to loaf around and do nothing. This fool even claims that's what it means to be a noble. Anyway, he couldn't help but think that even though he had made quite a few enemies, his brother Leo's death was supposed to happen 6 years from now. But with the strange circumstances surrounding all his brother's deaths, everything shifted. And now all the family responsibilities had landed on him as the sole heir. Just then, a few ministers from the county walked in, bringing even more paperwork for him to deal with. He closed his eyes and started to wonder why everyone in the county suddenly seemed to be working so hard. Back when his father was still the count, they would slack off and treat work like a rainy school day. He waved at them, signaling to drop the paperwork on his desk. But in the minister's eyes, he was radiating a deathly aura. They began to worry if they had somehow angered him, with some even vowing to work even harder to avoid any consequences. He was a secret mastermind who would eliminate anyone who displeased him. But having been a former workhorse himself, he wasn't handling all this pressure very well. He wondered if it would be possible to get the ministers to do all the work for him. Later that night, Evan was a bit shocked to find out that our boy had reached the 2nd tier in magic after just 2 years of self-study in poisoncraft, which meant he was quite talented and not shy about showing it. The little rascal was casting spells all over the house. Normally, it takes about 4 to 5 years of instruction to reach the 2nd tier in magic, and it often requires a natural talent as well. Our protagonist agreed that his magical talent was pretty decent. Deep down, though, he knows he's been practicing hard for self-defense because something just doesn't feel right. To wield magic effectively for protection, one must have perfect control over their mana, just like he's managing to do at this moment. Still, he can't help but wonder what good his magic is if it's only half-baked. He insists he's tried every type of magic this fantasy world offers, and at first, it was thrilling. He thought that mastering magic would mean he'd have nothing to fear, but now it feels more like he's scrambling to learn magic just to save his own skin. That's when the harsh reality hits him. His mana capacity is alarmingly small. Without enough mana, there's no magic, and that spells trouble, possibly even death. As he wallows in his predicament, we discover that innate mana capacity is akin to an athlete's natural weight class. While some are born with extraordinary talent, our main character is stuck with a minuscule mana pool, and no amount of training will change that. Yet he clings to a glimmer of hope. If all else fails, there's a way to fix it. Just then, Evan interrupts his thoughts, announcing that his invitation to the ball has finally arrived, leaving our present puzzled about what he's talking about. The scene shifts a few days later to the grand ball, where our main character makes his entrance in some truly majestic attire. The fit is impressive, but being the introverted guy he is, he claims to be already worn out, even though he just got there. This party, let's call it what it is your typical aristocratic gathering in the southern part of the Asteria Kingdom. It's basically a meet and greet for nobles, and since our MC is about to be sworn in as a count soon, he really has to show up. He gets into serious mode, thinking this is his golden opportunity to network with the nobility, which is crucial for his ultimate goal of living a peaceful life. But soon enough, he realizes that making those connections is going to be a lot tougher than he thought, as everyone seems to be fleeing from him in sheer terror. He even tries waving at them, but they literally just run away. Evan, his friend, tries to lift his spirits, telling him not to be down, But our guy insists he's not upset at all, even if his expression says otherwise. He tells Evan he expected this reaction and vows to try harder as he heads out on his own. However, our protagonist seems a bit clueless about what's really happening. He thinks the other nobles are looking down on him for being a low-class noble without any backing, and he's not entirely wrong. The current Palacio household is indeed filled with troublemakers, like his two older brothers. Picking up a wine glass, he assistants himself that he didn't come to the ball without a plan and is determined to unlock the social skills he's been secretly honing. He starts talking aloud about the wine's unique aroma in an attempt to spark a conversation, but due to a mysterious condition that makes it hard for him to show emotions on his face, he ends up looking quite villainous, especially when he tries to smile. He tells a lady he'd love to have some bottles at home, all the while thinking his smile is perfect. But in her eyes, he resembles a demon king, and she bolts, saying she'll tell her father to prepare them right away. To the other nobles, it looks like our protagonist just extorted and blackmailed the poor lady into giving him a limited edition regional wine. What a mess. Evan tries to comfort him while our protagonist insists that the lady must have just been shy. Later, we find him sulking in a corner while Evan is happily munching on food, teasing him about how his list of gifts has grown. It turns out the wine incident wasn't a one-off. Every time he tries to talk to someone, they think he's trying to blackmail them, handing him things like a panacea, citrus tea, and more. He can't shake the thought that Patio has become way more notorious than he ever imagined. With rumors swirling about him having killed his two brothers, he's basically turned into a figure of fear and dread. Feeling down, he tells Evan he needs some fresh air. As he steps outside, a certain red-haired beauty catches his eye. While he's out there, he can't help but wonder where it all went wrong. Suddenly, a soft voice calls out to him from behind, asking if he has a moment. He turns around, puzzled about where the voice came from since he doesn't see anyone. Looking down, he finally spots a cute young girl who introduces herself as Loria, the third daughter of Duke Altia. Hearing the name Altia, our MC recognizes it from the game, and he explains that the Altia family was one of the 3 major shadow players in the psychedelia game known as the Northern Troublemakers. This realization stung a bit, as he had hoped someone normal had actually spoken to him. He also wondered why he couldn't recall this girl at all had she not appeared in the game. Loria, however, was straightforward, asking him to lend her his strength for protection, as she will be facing an assassination attempt soon. Loria explains that she's in serious trouble and needs our protagonist's help, but when he looks at her, it's clear he's unsure. You see, Loria has been living under the protection of her father's mistress, but now that her father's health has taken a turn for the worse, she fears her older sisters might try to eliminate her. Our main character can't help but think this situation mirrors his own past with his brothers. As he gazes at her, it dawns on him that the reason he didn't recognize Loria from the game is that she must have already been dead and never made an appearance. Loria, looking as adorable as ever, pleads for his assistance, claiming that with his abilities he could really make a difference. But our protagonist firmly turns her down. She insists she's not coming to him empty-handed. If he saves her, she promises to share half of the Ultia family fortune. Still, he walks away feeling a twinge of sympathy for her. Deep down, he knows he can barely manage his own magic, so it's best not to give her any false hope. Despite wanting to help, he's not the all-powerful figure everyone thinks he is. As he heads into the party room, he can't shake the image of Loria's sad face, which makes him feel guilty. He wishes her luck before stepping inside. Meanwhile, Dees and Ren, who have been observing from a distance, start to wonder what their next move should be since one of the Ultia family members has approached their master. Deus ponders whether he should report this to the Red Moon, a code name for Utia, but Ren reassures him that everything's okay, because according to their intel, Loria is the only member of Altia not tangled up with Avalon. This means she's pretty much safe since Ronan, the one with the sin of meophobia, has gone off to deal with the rest of her family. They've decided that the rest of the Altia household household is going to be wiped out, all under the orders of the Red Moon. Ren adds that their main mission right now is to ensure their master doesn't catch wind of anything related to the Avalon situation. Meanwhile, our clueless main character is left wondering why everyone seems to be avoiding him. Does he have some sort of invisible barrier keeping people at bay? Just then, the red-haired woman from earlier approaches him, and it genuinely brings a smile to his face. Well, more of an inward smile since he can't believe someone actually acknowledged him. He thinks maybe this time he'll actually manage to socialize. But as he turns around, he realizes she's not just any ordinary woman. She's another shadow player. Looking at her, he recalls seeing her face in the game, and it hits him that no normal person would approach him first unless they were trouble. He greets her, calling her Lady Zenonia, which surprises her. How does he know her name? Our protagonist explains that she's quite famous in her own right. In the Asteria Kingdom, there are 3 prominent shadow player families: the Altia in the north, the Patio in the east, and the Zenonia in the west. This stunning, curvy lady is introduced as the eldest daughter of Count Zenonia, Clea. She asks him if she's really that well known, and he explains that while Kalea Patio runs a gang, the Zenonia family operates more like a clever criminal syndicate. Just thinking about it makes him shudder. He insists that what he really needs are some solid connections to help him maintain his peaceful, noble life. For the sake of that easy life he's always dreamed of, he believes he must steer clear of this curvy, stunning woman who seems like trouble. With a respectful bow, he compliments her beauty, almost as if he's trying to say goodbye, but she stops him, saying she wants to have a word with him about something. He replies that he'd love to, but there are too many eyes on them right now. Deep down, he wishes she would just leave him alone. With a smile, she tells him he's just as the rumors say, and adds that she looks forward to seeing him again, leaving him completely dumbfounded. As she walks away, he wonders what that could mean, sensing it's some kind of code, but he shakes it off. Meanwhile, Renee and Diaz, who have been watching from a distance, are pleased that their mission to keep our protagonist in the dark is going smoothly. However, Diaz points out a problem. Looking out the window where our protagonist is standing, they spot someone who has been tailing him for a while, and they quickly rush out to deal with the threat. The next day, our protagonist and Evan find themselves in a forest, with Evan asking if he's really sure this is the canyon he's been searching for. Evan notes that it's midday, the sun is shining, but the canyon is oddly dark. Our boy, however, isn't paying much attention. He's ecstatic that he's finally found his true objective. As they venture inside, he jokes that if this place turns out to be empty like the others, he might actually cry. But as he looks at the symbols on the walls, he realizes this is the real deal. He explains that in the game, finding this place was a breeze. Truthfully, he admits that the only reason he traveled all the way to the south under the guise of attending the ball was to discover this labyrinth right here. The labyrinth is called the Labyrinth of Whispers, and if you can crack all the riddles in its 8 rooms, you'll earn a powerful artifact as a reward. Exactly what he's after. He claims to have memorized all the routes and puzzles this labyrinth has to offer. Finally, he arrives at a massive door, and as he gazes at it, he confesses that seeing the labyrinth entrance in person is breathtaking. It feels so much more real than it did in the game. In the game, he tackled this labyrinth countless times. Evan, on the other hand, asks how our protagonist even knew a place like this existed. Our boy, without thinking, replies that he's been here often, leaving Evan puzzled about what this guy is talking about. Realizing he might have slipped up, our protagonist quickly backtracks, saying he was just kidding, and suggests they head inside. Once inside, they encounter some monsters and giant golem hands that could easily crush them like twigs. Evan wonders if these creatures are tied to the riddle, and if our boy gets the answer wrong, those giant hands will show no mercy. But our boy, unfazed, starts solving the riddle, leaving Evan to wonder how he can remain so calm in such a dire situation. Evan reflects that they've been together for 4 years now, yet he still doesn't understand him at all. Things like saving orphans, repaying random debts, helping free slaves, and even delivering seemingly pointless messages. Yeah, in Evan's eyes, our boy is a total weirdo. Still, watching him solve the riddles with ease makes Evan question how this is even possible. This guy has barely left the estate, yet he seems to know everything about this labyrinth. Regardless, Evan admits that the reason he keeps following this mysterious master of his is simple. Everything he does somehow leads to a good outcome. They finally make it inside, but our main character can't shake off the gruesome visuals of the game. He's feeling queasy, but as they step into a lavish room brimming with treasures and gold, his attention is immediately drawn to a hand statue adorned with multiple rings. He declares that their goal is the black ring and insists they should grab it and get out fast. Meanwhile, Evan, who's busy stuffing his pockets with gold, questions why our protagonist is so fixated on the black ring, which looks like the least valuable of the bunch. Our hero explains that taking anything else could lead to trouble down the line. Deep down, he realizes he's finally got his hands on the ring that holds the oath of restraint. As they start to head back, our MC feels pretty pleased with himself, thinking that snagging the ring was a breeze thanks to his gaming knowledge. But Evan suddenly gets a bad vibe and points out that the rock piles they passed while entering the canyon are actually golems, and they seem to be stirring. Evan quickly gets into battle mode, feeling anxious about their situation. To him, these golems are total unknowns, making this a nightmare scenario. He thinks that if he can just get his young master out safely, he wouldn't mind sacrificing himself. But our protagonist steps up, telling Evan to stand down because he'll take care of the golems. As the golems prepare to attack, Evan urges him to find an escape route first. With the golems closing in, Evan shouts a warning, saying his second-tier magic won't be enough to handle them. But our MC stands tall, confidently, invoking the Oath of Restraint, which activates the black ring. Suddenly, time seems to slow, and he finds himself in a different dimension. A voice introduces itself as a fragment inheriting the great will of Nasilla, instructing our protagonist to state the two restrictions he wishes to impose on himself. Our main character finds himself in a pretty intense situation. In the game, this part showed up as a choice window, but now hearing this mysterious voice and seeing a gigantic face looming in the dark cosmic expanse is a bit overwhelming. The Oath of Restraint is an absorption-type artifact, and as the name suggests, it lets the user impose limitations on themselves in exchange for power. However, the sheer force of the voice makes our MC tremble a bit. The voice urges him to declare his first restraint, and with a hand sign, he states that he will always perform the hand signs of Babylonia when casting magic. The voice then asks what he hopes to gain from this restriction, and our boy responds that he desires the ability to bend the laws of the world just a little more. The voice grants him this power. For his second restraint, our boy explains that he will strictly chant the words of Babylonia when using magic. When the voice inquires about his desire behind this restriction, he boldly claims he wants even greater power to defy the laws of the world, which momentarily surprises the mysterious entity. Our protagonist starts to worry that he might have messed something up, especially since the entity paused. He even mimicked the exact skill icon from the game just to be safe. By choosing both the hand signs and the word restrictions, he believes he can achieve the highest possible magic attack power. Thanks to all his repeated gameplay, he has memorized every combination used in the game. So, this should work. Finally, the entity speaks again, confirming that his restraint has been granted. It expresses gratitude to the human who has remembered all the gestures and mysteries of the forgotten god. Our protagonist is puzzled by what the entity means, but he quickly notices that the ring is being absorbed, indicating that all the restrictions were successfully applied. The entity concludes by telling our MC that it will always be watching over him as the one who will inherit its will, whatever that means. Just then, time seems to start flowing again, and it's right as the golems launch their attack on our MC. Evan tries to reach him, but our hero, unfazed, begins to cast his magic. He can't help but chuckle at his own spell, thinking how in the game it looked so impressive and powerful. But now, thanks to his meager mana, it's just so small. He gathers it in his hand, reflecting that no matter how hard he pushes himself, this will always be his limit. But hey, it's time to test out his new restraints. I have to say, his magic looks majestic. Maybe it's the pose. Anyway, he starts chanting, with the first word being refraction, which makes his magic begin began to take shape. Then comes repulsion, causing it to swell in size, transforming into a stunning blue light of electric magic. The magic ball is massive. Using hand signs, he adds another chant for direction, and finally, he unleashes it. The way he does it is so grand, reminiscent of how Gojo releases his hollow purple. The sheer power of our boy's magic leaves Evan in shock, as the lightning obliterates all the golems, turning them to dust. In the aftermath, Evan can hardly believe his eyes, wondering what on earth just happened. He asks our protagonist if he's been hiding his power all this time, but our boy shakes his head. Evan explains that in all his 15 years as a mercenary, he's never seen anything like that. He questions if our MC is really sure that was second-tier magic, to which our boy confirms, though deep down, he's just as confused about what transpired. He admits that this wasn't at all like it was in the game. In the game's turn-based battle system of psychedelia, magic could be enhanced each turn through hand signs or incantations. This time, he boosted the chain lightning magic with all 4 incantations and hand signs for a total of 5 turns. In other words, he simply used magic settings for a large-scale lightning spell. However, because of his restraint oath, he had to use the hand signs and incantations for all his magic, meaning his spells were enhanced time and again. Even so, our protagonist felt that the second-tier magic he used was a bit over the top, and the results exceeded his expectations, which caught him off guard. Meanwhile, Evan was just relieved they made it out, and as he sat down, he remarked that watching the battle was way more exhausting than actually fighting. He asked our protagonist, who had created such an unpleasant canyon. After a moment of thought, our hero realized that the Maze of Whispers had a different name in the game. The map layout and strategy guide were posted on the game's community website, and it was called The Maze of Paladon. He told Evan that a guy named Paladon was the one behind it, but Evan was too worn out to even process that information. I really love this duo. Our protagonist grabbed Evan, saying they needed to head back home because he had something in mind to do once they got there. This made Evan question why his usually lazy master was suddenly so motivated today. Our main character explained that every time he picked a hand sign that matched the spell's attribute he was casting, the power increased. If he chose the right incantation, the magic properties would get enhanced, which is how the game mechanics were designed to work. The only difference was that, unlike in the game where the visuals remained the same and only the numbers went up, in this world, the spell actually changed shape with each incantation. But he suddenly wonders if this only applies to him, especially since he's particularly skilled at controlling mana. He decides he'll need to test it out once his mana has recovered. But for now, he's just relieved that everything turned out okay. As they prepare to leave on their horses, we see Ren, who has been quietly following our main character, watching the whole scene unfold. She quickly makes her way to the canyon, and upon arriving, she spots the runes on the wall and realizes she can actually read them. She explains that these are the glyphs of the Aleph Empire, which essentially tell the story of the era of the forgotten outer gods. Renee's eyes catch another glyph hidden in a corner, which she translates as "for my friend, who shall be left alone from the coward Palin." As she examines the glyphs more closely, a smile spreads across her face. She shares that the one who halted the invasion of the dark creatures, standing victorious against the Alcal-Kalaka that devoured the hearts of the citizens, was none other than the brilliant emperor known as Palin the Great. The reason she knows all this is that she inherited all this knowledge at birth thanks to the ancient library she received. She briefly recalls our main character mentioning that Palin was the one who built the canyon. But as usual, she misinterprets the situation. She thinks that she knew our MC was special since someone like the bloody Queen Udia follows him, which is a pretty big deal. Having someone like Udia as a subordinate is something you'd only read about in history books. However, she continues to believe that our MC is actually a friend of Palin, completely misreading the glyphs he saw. Moreover, she claims that the phrase "our boy used while casting magic" doesn't exist anywhere in the ancient library, which only strengthens her belief that our MC is truly remarkable. Blushing, she admits that Udia was right all along, feeling a bit embarrassed about having followed followed orders without question all this time. And just like that, our boy ends up with another yonder in his harem. Kind of a strange thing to say since they're basically just kids, but I digress. Anyway, Rina spots Deus arriving and immediately asks if he got any info from the fool who was tailing their great master. Deus responds that the idiot is dead and he didn't even do it. It's more like the guy's head just twisted in midair. Rina insists they need to report this back to Udia for processing, and disagrees. So they head out. Meanwhile, in Zenonia County, Lady Kalia is sipping her tea, pondering how our main character is, just as the rumors say. She notes his chilling, emotionless expression and those abyss-like eyes. It bothers her that he called her famous. Count Zenonia is indeed strong and well-known, but for our boy to label her as famous despite not being involved in social activities is quite intriguing. What's really going on here is that Kalia is the true mastermind, using black magic to control her father, the Count, making her the real head of the family. The fact that our boy called her famous makes her think he might know something about her secret, which terrifies her since no one is aware that she's turned her father into a puppet. She recalls how our boy mentioned there are too many eyes on them, which she misinterprets as him having discovered the person she had following him. Now, that's a classic case of misunderstanding, like something out of an Eminence and Shadow scenario. Suddenly, Klaya gets a call from one of her servants who says there's a problem. Well, she asks what's going on, and the servant insists that it's better for her to see it for herself. When she heads to her room, she discovers that the person she had following our boy is dead. The servant explains that since the seal on the body didn't activate, it means he didn't spill any secrets. But Klaya quickly points out that the person who killed her man must have intentionally brought him to her room. Frustrated, she starts questioning how our boy figured out she was the one who sent this guy to tail him. And just like that, our boy gets misunderstood once again. At the grand halls of the Alta Ducal estate, the scene unfolds as Loria walks through the quiet corridors, her face heavy with disappointment and fatigue. Her mind drifts with thoughts of regret and realization. As expected, she knew he was not someone to underestimate. The distinguished one of the underworld, a man who possessed cold eyes, much like her father's. He was the kind of person she must never make an enemy of. Once he had been her last lifeline, but she knew he would never accept a deal that could bring him significant losses. All her assets and power had been stripped away by her sly siblings. The eldest daughter, Mararian, the second son, Ki, the eldest son, Tamion, and the second daughter, Pai. With nothing left, she had survived only through her father's love and mercy. But now, even that seemed uncertain. As she walked deeper into the estate, lost in despair, she whispered to herself that she no longer knew what to do. The moment she entered the estate, the maids rushed toward her in panic, their voices trembling. They cried out, calling for Lady Loria, their faces pale with fear. They told her that Lady Pine and Key had taken their own lives. Shock spread across Loria's face, her body frozen in disbelief. Her thoughts raced. Those people would rather stab their own family, and yet they took their own lives. It didn't make any sense. Fear gripped her heart as she asked about Tamalian and Marianne. Soon after, she was shown a horrifying sight. Both Talon and Mararian lying lifeless, their swords buried into each other's chests. Gloria's body trembled as terror consumed her. Her mind screamed with confusion, wondering why and how such a tragedy had occurred. Meanwhile, outside the Altia estate, Radan was seen leaving swiftly, a faint smirk curling on his lips as he muttered to himself, "Successfully eliminated." Gloria's mind flashed back to Alon's earlier words, the ones that had hinted that good things would soon happen. Remembering that, she felt an icy dread run through her veins. A realization struck her. The true mastermind of the Count's household, the one who had hidden his claws and waited for the right moment to seize power, had finally made his move. This was exactly what he meant. Now she had become the only successor in the ducal family overnight. A bitter laugh escaped her lips as she wondered what kind of monstrous devil she had made a pact with. But she knew there was no going back now. Those who betrayed him had already met terrible fates. There were too many precedents. She told herself that she must walk the path she had chosen, no matter how dark dark it became. A sudden determination lit up her eyes. 2 months later, a grand gift arrived at Duke Aaliyah's estate, addressed to Alon. Upon seeing it, Evan's eyes widened in surprise. It was a bottle of Cernant's wine, a rare and luxurious drink that cost thousands of gold per bottle. He was amazed, saying he had never expected to see such a treasure. When Alon read the letter accompanying it, he realized that the gift had not been sent by Duke Altia himself, but by Loria Aaliyah. It seemed that the youngest daughter had prepared it personally. He was confused, wondering why she would send it to him. The thought stung his conscience, reminding him that he hadn't been able to help her when she needed it most. He turned to the servant and asked if it was truly meant for him. The servant confirmed that the Duke herself had prepared it and ordered him to deliver it personally. That single phrase of the Duke herself made Alan pause. Realization struck him. The youngest Loria had become the Duke. In the next scene, Loria was shown in her office, busy with documents. When her work was finally done, she leaned back, stretching her arms as she softly remarked how quickly 2 months had passed. After her father's funeral, who had passed away due to illness, she had officially become the Duke following the succession ceremony. She recalled how she couldn't even enter that office before. The death of her siblings had happened so suddenly, yet no one had suspected her at all. She had an alibi. She was attending the ball at the time. Back then, her secret organization had been destroyed by her siblings, leaving her utterly powerless when she returned to the mansion. Later, she came to understand how deeply he had calculated everything. He had declined her plea with indifference on the surface, but had perfectly cleaned up everything behind the scenes. She wondered just how far into the future he had planned all of this. She hadn't even informed him about her father's funeral, not wanting to trouble him. Yet, he still helped her. It was clear that he had a reason. He needed Aaliyah for some part of his grand plan. Although she had successfully merged all the subordinate organizations under Altia, it still wasn't enough to match the immense power he hid behind his calm facade. That only meant one thing. He wanted something from her. Palatio, the distinguished figure of the underworld who had risen through sheer business prowess. If there was one thing she possessed that he didn't, it was her ability to manipulate the political stage from the shadows. He needed the Altia name for now. She decided to focus on what she must do, believing that the distinguished one would contact her soon. She hoped he would appreciate her gift of gratitude. The scene shifted once more, showing Alon in his quarters as Loria's servant bowed before him, saying that he would take his lead. Alan stood still, lost in thought, still unable to process the news. The fact that Loria, who had once been threatened with death, was now the Duke, didn't sit right with him. Evan noticed his troubled expression and wondered silently what was wrong with him now. A few months passed. The narration marked that this was 5 years before the original story began. Evan entered with excitement, calling out to Alan and addressing him as the young master before quickly correcting himself to call him the Count. Alan replied calmly that the succession ceremony hadn't taken place yet, but since a year had already passed, he supposed it was fine to be called that. Despite his words, he sighed quietly, thinking that he had never planned on becoming the Count. Still, since he had already adjusted to it, he decided to make the most of his noble status and use it to his advantage. Evan then handed him a letter saying it had arrived from Utia. Alon received it with a thoughtful hum, asking if there had been any information found about the assassins who killed Leo. The two men walked into the library, and as they took their seats, Evan responded that nothing had been revealed yet. The Information Guild was still investigating, and they would have to give it more time. He then looked at Alon curiously and asked what his next goal would be. Assuming that revenge was not his intention anymore, both of them sat in silence within the Grand Library. Alan sat in deep thought, realizing that all the things that slightly differed from the original game were probably butterfly effects caused by his own actions. Accepting this, he decided that he would simply be prepared for any unexpected events that might come his way. Evan, observing him, remarked that he suddenly sounded like a real count. Alan responded casually and brushed it off, but his curiosity soon drifted to the letter he had received. He wondered what Utia had written this time. Opening the letter, Alan began to read. Utia had written warmly, asking if he had been well. She mentioned mentioned that, as always, they were all doing okay and that everyone was pursuing their own hobbies. Dios's puppet shows had now reached a professional level, while Seoler loved to play and learn with her friends. Reinar quietly spent her days reading and making things, while Radan had developed a new hobby of tending his garden. As Alan read the letter, a gentle smile spread across his face. The routine of exchanging news every month had become something familiar and precious to him. It warmed his heart more and more each time he received a letter from them. Though he had never seen their faces, knowing that they were all growing well brought him a deep sense of contentment. The smile on his face was something he couldn't help but wear. A sudden realization struck him as he thought about it further. The 5 of them, the children, were already old now. Evan, noticing his expression, responded to his sudden thought, saying that they were ready to step out into society. Some of them even left the orphanage earlier than expected. The ones Alan had once ordered to save had now reached that age. Alan realized that the 5 from the orphanage were no longer the small, fragile children they used to be. They had grown. He quietly acknowledged that it was time to let them go. Evan seemed surprised, reminding him that he had placed them all in one place because they had been wounded. But Alan calmly reasoned that there was no need to do that anymore. The time had come to let them go. He thought to himself that he had cared for them enough to ensure they would not awaken as deadly sins, and because of that, they should be fine now. Evan agreed, noting that since they were all in good health, it was time to move forward. Alan's mind drifted toward his knowledge of the original game. Each boss battle had a rough outline of its setting revealed through narration. Utia possessed the talent of faith. Dios had the talent of the sword. Rina had the talent of studying. Seorang had the talent of a fighter. Roden had the talent of an apostle. If they used their talents in the right fields, they would surely thrive. The thought filled him with satisfaction as he mentally declared it a perfect plan. Feeling determined, he decided that while he was at it, he should also prepare a gift for each of them. He had planned on giving them gifts anyway, and now seemed like the right time. As evening arrived, his work for the day finally came to an end. Evan stretched and exclaimed with relief, saying that he would step out for a while before returning soon. Alan waved him off, bidding him goodbye. Alone in the quiet office, Alan smiled to himself, wondering if he might one day receive something back from them once. They became successful and influential. His thoughts softened as he hoped his letters would guide the children to step confidently into the world. Meanwhile, in another scene, Utia received Alan's new letter. Gathering everyone around, she announced that the orders had arrived. This time, however, the message had been delivered to each of them individually. The group grew silent, reading their respective letters with focused expressions. Though Seorang couldn't contain her excitement, her eyes sparkled as she eagerly unfolded her letter, marking the beginning of another chapter in their intertwined fates. Meanwhile, Yisha finished reading the letter sent by Alan. She announced excitedly to everyone that new orders had arrived. This time, Alan had delivered them individually, which surprised all the members. But before anything else, Yusa suggested that they should read the previous letter as well. Since the new instructions seemed to require a high level of attention, Xiang spoke cutely, mentioning that only Yusa had been able to read the earlier letters. Yusa explained that since Alan had given each of them a personal order, it meant he had decided it was time for everyone to see the contents themselves. The letter written by Alan made Seorang and the other sins react like curious kitten. Seorang clumsily repeated the first line of the message Alan had written. "How have you been lately? It seems you have many talented friends. If you need anything, let me know." Renee commented that it sounded like ordinary small talk, but Yusa smiled. She understood that Alan had intentionally kept the opening simple. After the greeting letter, this was the first true order he had issued. He had defined the elimination targets, assigned missions, and instructed them to report the results afterward. It was during this time that he entrusted Blue Moon to her. As everyone could see, he had personally chosen each of them, and all the sins were excited to meet him. Deus nodded and said it made sense. This prevented information leaked. She remembered her first order and smiled, recalling how firmly she had been told to understand the instruction clearly and carry out the mission without fail. Deus then wondered aloud if it would be better to visit Alan directly or contact him through magic communication. Raiden agreed that if leaks were the issue, Letters seemed unusual. Yusa's expression sharpened. She reminded them that their duty was simply to follow Alan's order. She gripped the letter tightly, and Deus let out a sigh at her unwavering resolve. Deus eventually said they should read the orders properly. Moments later, after going through her assignment, she explained that Alan had instructed her to head to Caliban. The nation of knights Seal Rang scoffed, calling it a desert colony she disliked. Raiden mentioned his destination, Rexy, the entertainment city. Renee said she was ordered to go to Latina, the mage city. Finally, Yusha, the female lead of the entire story, looked stunning as always when she spoke. She said she was assigned to the Holy Kingdom of Ryza. Everything they needed to do was clearly written in their letters. Dea said she didn't understand the reason, but Alan had ordered her to become a knight. It felt unusual even for her. Xiang added that Alan had also told her not to worry since the patronage would continue. Reina mentioned that he had revealed the locations of their gifts as well. Raiden responded calmly, saying they would understand everything once they reached their destination. Yusa gathered everyone and repeated the final rule Alan had given. They must never mention the name Blue Moon. Everyone agreed and prepared to leave. Next day, all the members assembled and departed to carry out Alan's orders. 3 months later, inside his office, Alan sighed. As expected, there was no noticeable change in the field of magic. He continued reading advanced magical texts to increase his capabilities and muttered that he would have to experiment on his own, ridiculous as it felt. Suddenly, he looked at his knight, Yuan, and asked what he was doing. Alan then remembered something and questioned him about the investigation into the killing of Leo. Yuan replied that the Information Guild still hadn't found anything. Alan seemed surprised for a moment and asked if there was anything else to report. Then he whispered under his breath that the butterfly effect caused by saving the 5 deadly sins had already gone out of control. Even Lyra, who was never supposed to appear in the storyline, had become the Duke of Ayla. The thought distressed him. She was expanding her power and influence at a terrifying pace within the underworld. Alan let out a tired chuckle and told Yuan they should stop investigating the Ascension altogether. It was dull work, and he already had far too many responsibilities piling up. Yuan looked at him with surprise and really master. Alan explained that the entire situation was clearly the result of his own ignorance. In a place like this, almost nothing escaped the network of the Information Guild. Even he felt uneasy about it. If he tried to uncover things he was not meant to touch, the consequences that returned to him could be far worse. He muttered that if an unexpected complication led directly to death, then the investigation was meaningless. In the end, organizations like that wouldn't harm him as long as he didn't interfere with their affair. He clarified to himself and to Yuan that there was no reason for any secret group to target him unless he approached them first. That was why he believed there was no point in continuing the investigation into Leo's death. Yuan nodded and agreed to inform the guild to stop. Then he suddenly remembered something. Right. There's another piece of news, he said. Apparently, Deus has been appointed as a knight in Caliban recently. Alan looked up in surprise. Really? Good for her. 3 months later, Yuan entered the room carrying snacks. Count, there's something else, he said. Apparently, Deus has created an entire knight order. Alan straightened. A knight order? Then she must be at least expert level or higher. Could she already be at the level of a sword master? Yuan replied that Deus had indeed reached the level of sword expert. Alan thought quietly, noting that it hadn't been long since she was first appointed. Students across the continent were now talking about it, claiming the world would see a 5th Master Knight within 10 years. Alan raised an eyebrow. Deus, the future Master Knight. You mean the one they call the Sword of Caliban? Yuan chuckled. Yes. She's incredibly talented. Caliban must be in an uproar because of her. She keeps gaining more recognition and followers with her swordsmanship. Alan silently admired her progress. 6 months later, almost a full year had passed since the 5 deadly sins left the orphanage. Alan had slowly grown accustomed to the responsibilities of a count when Yuan rushed in again with news. Count. Something very recent just came in. Alan asked what it was. Yuan replied, Deus officially become the Sword of Caliban. Alan froze in place. That meant one thing. She had become the 5th Master Knight. In the next moment, Alan said calmly that only a sword master could become a Master Knight. He explained explained that the swordmaster of Physidalia was a superhuman who had surpassed the aura blade and unlocked a unique ability known as deviation. He looked at Yuan and asked if he was really saying that Deus had become a swordmaster. Yuan interrupted and clarified that she was about to reach that level. She hadn't created her deviation yet, but the nation had granted her the title of Master Knight regardless. Not only had she defeated the fourth sword in a duel, but Caliban had also lost one of their Master Knights to the northern barbarians. Alan thought for a moment and acknowledged that the two sides had been at war for more than a decade. Yuan continued, realizing mana and learning to control it took around 5 years, while creating a deviation usually required decades. The first sword, Reharnett, had been 32 when he became the youngest Master Knight in history. He had wielded a sword since the age of 5 and was unmatched in strength. Even with that talent, it had taken Reharnett over 20 years to reach that level. Yet now, a child who once knew nothing about swords, Deus was becoming a Master Knight. Alan's eyes widened. So, if she's only waiting for her deviation, does that mean she has already surpassed Reharnett? She might reach Swordmaster status soon. A small smile appeared on his face. Maybe I can benefit from her sooner than I thought. Yuan quietly took note of his reaction. Alan looked at the letter with surprise and murmured that perhaps he couldn't do anything more. But Yuan immediately insisted that he should not blame himself. Alan held the letter again and explained that he only ever received letters from Yusha. Even after she left for the Holy Kingdom, she continued to send them regularly. Every letter contained news about the 5 deadly sins she grew up with. It seemed they stayed in close contact. He sighed, saying that even though none of them had ever seen his face, they could have at least thanked him for the gifts. He paused, then slapped his cheeks lightly and corrected himself. He was already grateful that they hadn't destroyed the entire kingdom. After awakening as the 5 deadly sins, Alan whispered that as long as they were living well, he was genuinely happy. Then scene shift to Caliban, central area of Kritham. Caliban, the central district where high-ranked nobles resided, held the grand mansion of the illustrious Sor Scapliff Knight Order inside. Countless knights practiced their swordsmanship. At the top of the hill stood Deus, now in full knight uniform. He looked immense, calm, and strikingly handsome. His title echoed across Caliban. Deus Mark Lane, captain of the Sor Scapliff Knight Order, youngest Master Knight in history. A girl suddenly waved at him with joy. Brother Deus smiled back. He looked far older and more composed than in his childhood. He smirked softly, thinking that even after a full year had passed, the memories still made him feel embarrassed. He remembered the day he lost everything to the black corruption, how his sister fell into darkness. Deus had been consumed with uncontrollable rage trying to protect her. His hatred dragged him down repeatedly to the point where he was nearly imprisoned. He had completely fallen into the dark. The fact that the great moon saved his life wasn't reason enough. He had sworn his allegiance out of desperation, believing it was the only path left. He thought of Yosha's voice and reminded himself of the promise he had made to take revenge with his own hands. Working under Blue Moon placed him in countless dangerous missions. He never complained, never hesitated. Each assignment became a stepping stone toward facing the black forces. After several years, he finally received his first personal order. When he opened the last letter, he had been confused. The order was different from anything Blue Moon had given before. It led him to a small inn in southern Caliban, where he was told to retrieve a gift. At first, it didn't excite him. Gifts meant nothing to someone who had lost everything. But when he arrived at the location, Deus instantly understood what his master Alan had been trying to give him. The gift was his sister, alive, safe, and waiting for him. His eyes trembled with disbelief as he read the final line of the letter. The gift from the great moon is your family, the one you thought you lost forever. Deus broke down. Tears streamed uncontrollably as he ran forward and embraced her with shaking arms. His sister stared at him in shock, unable to believe what she was seeing. To Deus, she was more precious than his own life.